Welcome, folks. We had some technical difficulties with the camera system, and we spent some time straightening that out. So we apologize for what happened about 20 minutes ago and now have it straightened out. Let's start going through our legislative report. This is our draft report. Ellen has been working with Michael O'Grady, and we are going to start going through it line by line. So Ellen, I'm turning it over to you. Welcome.
Thanks. Ellen Tchaikovsky from the Office of Legislative Counsel. Last Wednesday, Mike O'Grady sent this committee a updated draft based on last week's meeting with the changes in yellow. Between then and now, Representative Emmons reached out to me with a couple of minor changes she wanted to make in addition prior to this meeting. So the draft that you have in front of you today is a draft that I updated. So Mike's changes are still in yellow and my changes are in green. And printed out, the green is less easy to read, and I apologize. On the screen, it was pretty clear, but the things that I added based on Representative Emmons' comments are in green, and we will definitely discuss those. So, did you have a preferred place to start, Representative Emmons? You just have not changed at all.
Yeah, the first page 3. Well, we have the index on table of contents on page 2, our statutory charge on page 3, and the function of our advisory committee and statute on page 4, and then our membership on page 5. So I would suggest we start on page 6 with item D, which is a summary of our proceedings.
Right. Do you want me to read it?
No.
Okay.
God, no.
So
It would be good for us to look at this line by line. If you could explain what the first paragraph is and explain what the second paragraph, but I would ask the members to really read it, read the languages.
sure. So the first paragraph discusses the testimony and deliberation that this committee went through, and it provides just some basic high-level information. Including the fact that as of today, the committee has met 8 times between June 22nd and August 10th, just today, to review the proposals. It then talks about the fact that you heard testimony from many different groups of people. It then specifically mentions you heard testimony from 2 members of BGS who have been really providing this committee with a lot of information. And so the first sentence in green, which is the last sentence of paragraph 1, is language that I just added based on a request from Representative Emmons about all of the documentation that Stephen Fry has been presenting you. So I added a sentence, the research and documents provided by Stephen Fry are posted on the committee's webpage and can be found in the following link.
Right, because we can't read that, so thank you for reading it.
And I apologize. And that was specifically about whether or not some of the documents that Stephen created should be appendices to your report or if they should be included directly. My suggestion was that you could include a hyperlink that if anyone wanted to see not only his documents, any of the other testimony you received will be on the website. So that was a suggestion.
Allison?
I would like to incorporate what Janet Ansel addressed earlier on. I do think we need, nowhere in the first 6 pages do we say why we are doing this work. And I think we need a framing up of this is a result of COVID. How do we return to the building after the pandemic? Nowhere does it say we've had a pandemic and this is why we're having to do this. So I think we need a framing up paragraph as to why we needed to go through this and what the challenges COVID presented from a public health point of view and why we are wanting to come into the building in a thoughtful fashion.
Jana?
Can I make a suggestion that maybe we do that in a cover letter so that it really does stand out as a cover letter to the report?
Yeah, but I also think it should belong in the report somewhere.
Also be in there, but it will get lost if a lot of people are maybe not going to read the report, particularly the introduction. So anyway, just throwing it.
I think it could be both, but it definitely needs, because otherwise we're just doing this work and there's no real, it doesn't ever say why we're doing it.
So if we did a little paragraph, a new one, and this one become a 2 and then renumbered, just a statement as to why we're doing this work.
Yeah.
This is to help the legislature come back into doing its work into the State House for session 2022. Under the world of COVID. I mean, we just don't know what's going to happen.
And the other thing, I'm hoping that we can say, whether it's here or in a cover letter or both, is that that this is an extraordinary time and that we're depending on people who
Being flexible.
need to be in the building for one reason or another, to be flexible and adaptable, and understand that as the COVID evolves, that some of our recommendations will also evolve.
And I'd add something about these are solutions, these are temporary solutions to get us through this period of time.
Ellen is writing as fast as she can, so we may.
Oh, I have total confidence in Ellen.
Give her time to think.
So I think I was keeping up, but I missed what Senator Clarkson said, but how about this, just quickly, what I drafted was, the committee, met in response to the need for the General Assembly to return to the building after the COVID-19 pandemic. This.
Not after,
May not be
because we're
after.
still dealing with the COVID issues.
How about
After our remote session.
how about as the COVID-19 pandemic evolves?
But anyway, we don't want to wordsmith. That'll take us
Let Ellen do some
tomorrow.
here.
This has been an extraordinary time full of challenges. Returning to the State House will require flexibility and that is sort of what I lost with when you jumped back.
Adaptability
Adaptability.
or a willingness to adapt. Willingness to adapt
From all entities,
Well,
from everyone.
from everyone.
and I'd say the ability for us to return in a healthy and safe fashion. I mean, I think the key is health and safety. And just also to underscore maybe in the next sentence that these are temporary solutions for, we hope, a limited period of time.
Instead of saying everyone, could we say the public and the legislators?
Legislators, staff, press, lobbyists, members of the public.
Yeah.
I think that's.
List it out,
probably the
let's try to.
list. Yeah, I think that's
I won't
better.
say that,
Yeah.
but just try to include a larger
Yeah.
group.
So everyone is okay.
No,
No.
I'd list them. It's
Oh,
not too hard to
okay,
list
sure.
them. I would list
Why
them.
don't we just say
Yeah.
all who work in
Yes.
or visit?
Yes.
State House.
I just think it's important that we get across that we.
Everyone.
Group of legislators need to be flexible and the public needs to understand.
Well, everybody does. Public.
Work in and visit the State House.
Read the sentence back to us, please, Ellen.
Returning to the State House in a healthy and safe manner will require flexibility and adaptability from all those who work in and visit the State House.
I think a willingness to adapt.
Willingness to adapt.
People need to come into the building understanding that it may be different and it may not be everything they've always anticipated here, but you don't need to use all those words.
So that could be a new one. And
Yes.
then we can renumber. And then we can also do a cover letter.
Yeah.
In addition, which we can have a few.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if I may,
yeah,
for
Mike?
the record, Michael Sharon from Legislative Council. Do you also want to make a reference in that opening paragraph to the inadequate HVAC system at present?
No, we've talked about that later in the, yeah, that, people could get wrapped around the HVAC system pretty quickly. And there's a lot of nuances to that. So I don't want, you know,
Right. So to me, what was important here, when I first came to this committee, I was feeling as though we were going to create the world the way it used to be in spite of the pandemic. That was sort of my mindset. And it took me an hour or so sitting here and listening and realizing that that's not true. So that other people may feel that way. And I'm thinking in some ways what we're saying is, no, this is going to be different. And we need to recognize that, you know, everybody is making changes. So that's why I think it's important to say it.
And the temporary piece, you got that right.
Yes.
okay, so that's the first paragraph, number one. So now the paragraph that we just worked on previous to this language is, starts out with how many times we met. Are there any recommended changes there? Is this okay with folks?
Good.
Okay, let's go to the next paragraph. Committee discussed multiple standards.
Right, so this is a really like high level discussion of some of the things you discussed. Not a ton of detail, but it does mention that you discussed standards and proposals for the space, whether and how to require vaccination or proof of vaccination or PPE. Also discuss the use of certain air quality performance standards. And then, so the next piece of green language that's in there says, the committee learned that airflow and air quality are not the same metric, and that airflow does not guarantee air quality. And this was in response, I don't know, Evan, if you want to express.
My concern was that colleagues think that airflow is going to ensure better air quality. And the standard that is used, that the ASHRAE standard is really based on airflow that your current HVAC system can provide. It doesn't necessarily mean that your air quality is any better, or the quality of your air, that's, you know, particles that are in your air are better. It's just saying that the HVAC system can perform to this particular standard of providing the airflow in a committee room. It doesn't ensure that the coronavirus is not in that air. So I really wanted a clarity there because I think our colleagues are confusing airflow with air quality,
I agree.
and it's not the same.
I think it's good. I'm okay with that next paragraph.
That last sentence is just that multiple people recommended that live streaming continue and through video conferencing tools.
Right.
Johnson?
Is that subject addressed somewhere else in here that I've missed? Live stream?
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
This is a
This is
really
a summary,
high-level-
high-level summary.
this is just, it's all addressed later, each big piece.
Fine with that, folks, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are no changes on page 7.
I have just a question about the first sentence in that paragraph on page 7, where it talks about how the space can be used safely to meet legislative needs, and we've struggled with that word safely. I don't know if there's a better word, but I am
Responsible.
about that word.
Effectively?
Effectively, or
Responsible.
responsible out could be used to meet legislative needs. Don't need it in there.
Well, but we wanted to, I mean, I think it's different, to go to your point. We're wanting to be responsible, we're wanting to be thoughtful. I mean, maybe we could say thoughtfully, but what we're doing is, we're not just doing our legislative needs as we had them before. We're trying to adapt and do it more thoughtfully.
It was just the word safely. I had the rest of the paragraph. I think
How
was fine.
about,
I
how
just
about if we just
Take it
said
out.
how that space could best be used
Yeah.
to meet legislative needs at this time?
That's fine.
Perfect.
More words, but it says the same thing.
Well, and first to COVID. I mean, this is a special time.
So did you get that, Alan?
Yes. Right, so then that paragraph does discuss whether and which committee rooms should be used, whether to enforce capacity limits, how spaces outside of the State House should be used to accommodate overflow. So again, just summarizing high level your discussions.
Right.
Do we want to could accommodate overflow from full capacity committee meetings? Because we're also talking, oh, I don't know, okay, how spaces outside.
Why don't we just say similarly, the committee considered how to use spaces outside of the State House? And how such space could also
Yeah,
serve.
take out the
and take out the
overflow.
overflow language. Drafting technique is just to eliminate things.
From your old days.
Yeah.
So would you want to say the committee considered how spaces outside the State House could be used? Is that what that is?
I've considered how to use spaces outside of the State House
How to use?
and how such space could also serve additional legislative needs.
You want to put a period after needs?
Press conferences.
Do you need to
You
have
could
such
just
as?
stop at needs.
I
Yeah.
think that would be a better idea.
Good, the other
Legislative
words.
needs, period, put such as caucuses.
Yep.
Make the bill, make it shorter.
Adopting Janet's theory.
Anything else?
Oh, just take out that whole,
Yeah, take out such as caucuses or joint hearings.
You might want to leave during the 22 session.
Yes, it could also serve additional legislative needs during the 20 session. We're okay with that, folks?
Yeah.
Okay, next.
I don't really know how staff workplaces are different from staff offices. I think it should just say certain staff offices within the State House and not get rid of or certain staff workplaces. I mean, all workplaces are their offices. I mean, that seems to me is a distinction without a difference. But anyway,
Well, I think that may be in reference to committee assistants. They really don't have an office per se, unless you say a committee room, but I don't know.
We often generalize and just say workspace, and that workstations, offices, meeting rooms, et cetera.
so you could get rid of offices and just say workspaces,
Whether to a certain workspace,
certain staff workspaces.
kind of a catch-all.
Yeah, because then we don't have to repeat ourselves.
So it would we discuss whether to move certain staff workspace within the State House?
Yeah, or to other buildings or facilities. Other than that, I think it's fine.
John?
I think I'm a paragraph behind.
Oh, all
We
right.
talk about this, the mitigate potential health risks. That phrase appears, I saw it at least 3 or 4 times in here. And I'm just wondering if it's a little misleading or if that's really the way we want to say it.
So you're in the middle of the first paragraph
It's,
on page 7.
Yeah, yes.
Committee also discussed
yeah.
whether other spaces in the State House could be converted to committee rooms to allow for improved airflow and appropriate public spacing. to mitigate potential health risks.
And like I said, that phrase appears several times, and mitigate, I guess, means to reduce, which is what we're trying to do. So I guess that's a good word, but it just kind of sounds to me like we're suggesting that we're going to make people safe, and it might be misleading. And potential, I mean, we'll always have potential health risks, maybe not from COVID. So that's kind of an odd word to have in there. I can live with this. It strikes me as an odd and maybe
Would it be
misleading.
better to mitigate the COVID risk? That make it worse?
Well, maybe just mitigate health risks. I don't know. I don't know what bothers me, other than mitigate might be misinterpreted to mean you're going to be safe.
So
That's not what mitigate means, but
to lower potential health risk or to reduce potential health risks.
Yeah, I would say to reduce
how
potential.
about just
health.
reduce health risks?
Say anything.
Stop at the word spacing.
Public spacing, we could just stop.
Yeah, we just eliminate it. But like I said, this appears more than once. Report.
Take out to mitigate potential health risks?
Yep.
Keep the period of the spacing.
I would just hate for it to be construed that we think doing this stuff is going to protect you
That's
from.
been my
getting sick.
worry.
Do we need public spacing? You could put a period after
We
airflow,
could, even better.
because we really didn't address, is it 3 feet?
You know, we didn't do spacing.
Yeah.
Other than I keep going for more elbow room.
You could say improved airflow to minimize health risks or potential health risks.
But didn't Alice just tell us
We don't-
airflow isn't air quality?
With air quality.
Yeah, so maybe airflow shouldn't use, maybe we should say to, get rid of what the specific things are and just to reduce
Make it-
potential health risks.
So the committee also discussed whether other spaces in the State House should be converted to committee rooms to allow for improved airflow, period.
Good.
That's fine.
Is that fine?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else, John?
Well, it'll come again. We'll have to look at it when it rears its ugly head again.
So, sorry, just your point though about airflow and air quality, they're not the same. I'd say what we're really trying to do is reduce impacts on public health. I mean, reduce, so I wouldn't put so much emphasis on the airflow. I would keep reduce the exposure, reduce the health risks. I mean, I think that's what we're trying to do, not the airflow is not air quality. So I wouldn't put so much emphasis on the airflow. I mean, I would really keep in what we're trying to do is reduce potential health risks. That's our objective. And airflow is not air quality, as you said before. So I think.
So
We
we're
can get rid of it.
converting the committee rooms to reduce potential health risks,
Yes, to,
take out airflow.
yeah,
I think it just seems like we're giving a false sense of security, though.
About the health risks?
Right, we can't,
I think we
infectious
should
disease,
not talk about health risks.
yeah. When you're talking about infectious disease, there isn't a lot you can do to protect yourself if you get exposed, and airflow is not going to save you.
right, exactly. But we are trying to reduce.
Converted to committee rooms to allow for improved, no, I lost, work environment.
To promote a healthier work environment maybe, or whatever. But we are trying to reduce health exposures to infection, John. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, is to improve the health and reduce improve public health and safety. Isn't that what we're trying to do?
What I'm hearing here is that if you keep saying health risks, it implies that we're going to make the building safe. And you have no health risks. And we cannot ensure that and guarantee that. I think that's the concern if we're saying health risk. Am I interpreting that correctly?
That's my point, yes.
So the question is, we know we can't make the building safe. No building is going to be safe. The question is, we're trying to have an environment that our colleagues feel comfortable and feel okay to work in.
Well, and that means safer, maybe.
For some
safer.
people, it may mean safer. For some people, it may mean
Comfort.
comfort. Some people, it may mean the room is cooler. I got more room to move. Where are we, folks?
Well,
I don't think we can actually make the statement about health risks because you are implying that we have cured some. I don't think we can make that claim. I think it would be disingenuous for us to try to.
Well, but we are trying to make things safer and
well,
healthier.
We're
So-
trying to make it okay. We're trying to make it so people feel okay in the building.
and people feel okay for different reasons. Some people want everybody vaccinated. Some people want everybody masked. Some people want to be all by themselves in a room. That's me. So, you know, people have different things that will make them feel safe. So I think we need to recognize that we can't do that. And I think we should not refer to minimizing health risks because I think we're overpromising when we do it.
So what do we say though? Do we say we're hoping to make the building safer?
No,
No, we're.
No, we take it out. We say, so somebody who really cares about airflow is going to be comforted by the fact that we've looked at airflow and we've tried to minimize the number of people. Some people who want more physical space are going to be comforted by the fact that may have capacity limits. Someone who is comforted by masking will want to see that we have a masking rule, which we don't at the moment.
Yeah, and that's what this does. It talks about
It just
air
depends.
space.
So what if,
Different people have different comfort.
so what if we say, we discuss whether other spaces in the State House should be converted to committee rooms to allow for an improved work environment?
Yes, that's good. Let's leave it at that. Good work.
Want to be a little.
No, not me. No way. Anything else, John, in this paragraph?
No,
Except again. So we can just hit the record button.
Yeah. Okay. So, next paragraph, we discuss whether to move certain staff workspace,
Yep. Staff workspace.
house and other buildings.
And then
And then we discussed the 2 acre, 4 acre in order to provide additional space. And we discussed moving legislative operations staff to alternative spaces in State House. And we also ended up looking at 2 acre for that.
at the top of page 8, we have the mitigating potential health risks again.
We're not
We're
right
still on
there.
page
We're
7.
on page 7.
We need to list the offices.
Yes, that was
Oh, I
talked
wasn't
about, yeah, that was talked about alternative spaces for Sergeant Armed State House Police. Yes, we briefly touched
So
on that.
do you want to list the actual offices we talked about moving, or do you want to talk about examined offices into the things that we talked about?
So in more detail later.
Can we go in more detail later?
Right, the specific recommendations are later.
So this is the broad overview.
That's why I'm saying, do you need to list those council
Right, you probably don't.
offices?
Yeah.
Legislative operations,
Mhm.
joint fiscal. You can say in an overview that all entities working in the building testified as to their needs. Took all those testimonies into consideration.
So where it says the committee discussed moving office of ledge council to 2 acre or 4 acre, we could say we discussed the use of 2 and 4 acre in order to
Mhm.
provide additional space within the State House and one Baldwin.
Fine. Less is more here.
Well, we talked about 2 Aiken, 4 Aiken, 133 and 109.
Right.
Yeah.
133 and 109. So you're saying that should be added as well.
I would strike the
You're
references
taking
to
them out.
specific entities and talk only about the buildings we
Mhm.
examined.
Mhm.
This is a high level picture.
That work for folks? See what
Yeah.
I was saying?
Yes, I agree with Joe.
So, did you follow that one, Ellen? For 2 Aiken, 4 Aiken, 1 Baldwin, we also mentioned 109 State Street and 133 State Street.
Right, so I would cut off the last two sentences, three sentences, so that this paragraph would just read. The committee also discussed whether to move certain staff workspaces within the State House or to other buildings or facilities within the Capitol complex. The committee discussed the use of 2 Aiken, 4 Aiken, 133, and 109 in order to provide additional space within the State House. And 1 Baldwin Street.
You need to say State Street, 133 and 109 State Street. That's good.
Oh, and did you want to add, and all entities working in the building testified to their space needs, or?
Well, not all entities did testify, quite frankly. Lieutenant Governor never testified, nor did the governor. And we discussed our spaces.
So this paragraph would end at 1 Baldwin Street. Correct? You all right?
Yep.
Okay, let's flip the page. Okay, here's an overview of our recommendations.
Mitigates potential health threats is twice in that paragraph.
Yes. Yep.
Let's read the paragraph and see what it says here.
That's a change 21 to,
Whatever.
Yeah, it's probably gonna come in somewhere in 23, maybe 24.
Well, I mean, you may not even want to recommend several or a number of. I wouldn't.
They've listed it out by numbers in the back, so I think that's what they're tracking. I think that's how Michael had it set up.
Yeah.
So we would want to include taking out mitigate potential health threats and maybe put in activities in a manner to allow for an improved work environment.
Or it could just end after legislative activities, period.
Whatever.
I think we're gonna have difficulty not saying something about doing it in a thoughtful, safe manner. I mean, you know, we are trying to mitigate, but I mean, that is in fact what we're trying to do is mitigate potential health threats. I mean, if you don't say that, I mean, at some point, we need to say that we're trying to reduce and improve the work environment. We're trying to improve the work environment and we're trying to reduce exposure and health risks. I mean, why can't we say that somewhere? I think we should say it at least once because that's what we're attempting to do. That's why we're spending all this money. Not just to return to normal.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. The opening paragraph is the very opening paragraph, the new one. Can you read that to us? Because maybe that could indicate, it indicates COVID.
Sure, it does. So in response to the General Assembly coming back to the building as COVID-19 pandemic evolves, Oh, so actually,
No.
so
That's,
right, so that's only half a sentence.
Yeah, we had that new introductory
Right.
paragraph.
So it would start with the Legislative Advisory Committee on the State House met in response to determining the General Assembly coming back to the building as the COVID-19 evolves.
well, what were we charged with? I mean, I think we were charged with how to come back into the building and after COVID. I mean, I don't think it matters how many times we met. I mean, what's our charge? What was our,
Paragraph prior to that,
yeah, it was
our framework.
our framing up paragraph that you drafted with us.
I mean, yeah, that's what I was just reading from.
But I think part of what we were hoping to accomplish with that was to make it clear that things are going to be different. That this, we're not
We're in the,
reopening last year's or 2 years ago State House. We're opening
Right.
a State House that is going to look different. And so there
Because
needs
of-
to be a stronger statement about that. That doesn't start with how many times we
Right.
met, but
Right.
starts with, you know,
What our objective was.
changed circumstances that we're in. Well, my goal with it was a little different, which was to focus more on the change and the fact that people are going to have to be accommodating and they're going to have to understand that, you know, there may need to be more flexibility than they might want.
and it's extraordinary time because of COVID. I think we
Yes, I
need
think
to
that's
say
the-
Oh, we absolutely need to talk about the pandemic.
extraordinary time due to the COVID pandemic.
So bringing legislators back to the State
COVID-19
House.
Pandemic has created an extraordinary
yes.
situation.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, and after working remotely for 16 months, that's, you know, our charge was to how to bring legislators back to the State House safely, as safely as.
Yeah, why don't we work with you, Ellen? Just have a few of us work with you on wordsmithing that, because that's going to be really important. That's our introductory paragraph. And we've got too many scriveners here, and maybe we can work with you to really frame that. And that's where maybe we can mention COVID. And this is under the COVID situation, so that implies that there's health implications, that there's all sorts of layers to that. And COVID is really the driver here in these decisions. So let's a few of us work with you on that. That would be and that would hopefully take care of the issue that deals with mitigating health risks. That we lay it out in the first paragraph, that it's COVID that's driving this, and anyone who reads that's going to understand there's health issues, there's safety issues, there's different ways of doing your business. So let's a few of us work with Ellen on that later. So let's go back to page 8, number 2, or whatever number it's going to be. That we decided that in the first sentence, it would, after deliberation and our recommendations, that these measures be implemented by the management committee or rules committee so that the General Assembly returns to the physical use of the State House for most legislative activities. And leave it there. And what, do we keep the rest of the sentences? Specifically, we recommend for proceedings, allow for 4 proceedings to be conducted within the State House, and that standing committees will return to in the State House. And in addition, media and public will be granted physical access to legislative proceedings subject to potential measures to mitigate health risks. Do we want to keep that in there in terms of that last sentence?
It's the correct usage of that
Yes.
word. I mean, I feel like
Yeah,
It is.
in that sentence, it makes sense to me because it's what we're,
Yeah,
what we're promising. It's what we're asking of people.
Right.
yeah, I agree. And then what's the green thing say?
So it says the recommendations listed below received unanimous approval from the committee with one exception indicated below.
Trying,
Maybe more than one.
Yeah, it's more than one.
Well, there may be more than one, so I'd wait on that sentence.
yeah, but this was not talking about, this is at a point in time last week.
Right.
I know, but that may be different. What we were talking about, I mentioned to Ellen, I said, we did have some straw votes. We did have some votes. Should we list what the results of the votes were? And one thing she recommended, it was really at that point in time, it was the standing committee. That was the vote that there was one person, one opposed, that standing committees be in the State House. That's what was available to us back on Thursday or Friday, whenever we spoke.
So we could just fix it by just saying with exceptions as listed below.
As noted or something.
Where is that listed? That I couldn't figure out what that meant.
So I indicated the one dissenting vote in the footnote for that vote, which is on the next page. Footnote.
I think to call out, I mean,
And I didn't list the.
right, you just said with one dissenting.
Right.
I'll just say the recommendations listed below received a majority of.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't need to be.
Isolated.
Because we still haven't voted on some of these things, and things have changed in the last 2 weeks since we discussed this, which I think we're about to discuss.
My concern was, when we say majority, would the management committee or rules committee say, well, was it a split committee? Was it a 6-5 vote? Was it a 7-4? That's my only concern, that it was pretty unanimous in our decisions up to
So
that point. That was my concern, that there were some strong votes that were taken.
hearing that, Alice, how about we mark it and come back to it after we go through the rest to make sure.
Right,
we're consistent with what we're saying.
after we've finished voting on everything.
We're talking about this green,
Yes.
trying to fix that.
Just come back to it after
Well,
we.
Yeah, I would just return to
But
it
it could
when we're done.
simply be said received approval from the committee with one dissenting vote.
Well, but
There were votes, we took the vote on the vaccination. That was 11-02. We took the votes on the standing committees. This is as of last Friday. That was 11-11. So, people may think that my concern was, there's a real difference when you come in with a real substantial vote in favor of something versus a very close vote. That's the only thing I was thinking of, because this is a tough decision,
Well,
these proposals.
Another question in my mind is everybody on the committee going to endorse the report? Because that would be more telling, quite honestly. And even though there might, in any committee, there are split votes on elements of a report.
yeah,
And everyone signs on to the document. So
exactly.
I think we should come back to this after we've gone through a few more things. And plus, two of us will be there to explain anyway.
See, my thinking at the time, talking to Ellen, there's the vaccination issue and mandating vaccinations. That's going to be a big issue. And we vetted it and we had a strong vote.
Well, yeah,
And then for standing committees, we had a pretty strong vote at that point. So that's where I was coming from last Friday.
That
That's
makes
all.
sense.
Because those are really going to be highlighted discussions.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going here. So these are recommendations. So Ellen, maybe you can give us the summary of the first one?
Sure, so this was the first vote that you took, persons entering the State House, everyone, so legislators, staff, advocates, media, the public are strongly encouraged to be vaccinated, but not required.
so
Allison?
I think things have changed since we discussed this. I think the Delta variant, I mean, our governor's press conference today, he's looking at requiring vaccinations for certain departments and things. I think this is too up in the air actually for us to make a recommendation at this point. And I would urge us to think about leaving this decision about masking and about vaccine verification to the Joint Legislative Management Committee and Joint Rules to do in November, once we are clear on where we are. I think the Delta variant has thrown the whole thing into a loop. And I think that I think Ruth's comments are thoughtful, and I think it's too early for us to be making a specific recommendation right now. I would leave that.
That's already what number 2 said.
Number 2, I think, covers.
Well, it's 1 and 2 go together. I mean,
Number 2 already says. Follow
says-
guidelines.
it says proof of vaccination should not be required. Well, after Delta, maybe they would like vaccine verification. Maybe the CDC in Vermont will make it easier for us to do that.
Allison, I think it's covered.
Yeah.
2, Janet, and then Butch.
What way do you think it's covered? I'm sorry.
What she's saying, a proof of vaccination should not be required, but JLMC and relevant rules committee should assess whether masks
About
or
masks,
other
yeah.
personal measures,
Yeah.
personal health measures should be required
I'm-
based on state health orders and CDC guidance.
I do and understand what Allison was saying and what you were responding. I'm fine with what's written. If we're at a point where we are seriously talking about mandating proof of vaccination before you walk in the building, I don't think we should be in the building.
We'll be zooming.
We'll be zooming. I'm not open to revisiting that question. I mean, if we revisit it, I will vote against it.
So then what do you see the difference between 1 and 2? Why do we even have 1? Why don't we just leave 2 then?
Because 1 is what we voted on. There was a motion and there was.
But it was in a point in time where I disagree now. I mean, Delta has changed that. I think Delta has taken that decision
I'm gonna,
pretty fundamentally.
if I can push back a little bit. What we lack now, that we had when we made that vote, was a governor's declaration of emergency. My memory serves. We don't have that right now. And without it, I think you're on real shaky ground, making a statement that implies we are recommending anything.
I don't disagree, but I would, instead of saying anything explicit, I would rather leave it to GLM&C and joint rules to make in later as we see where we are in November.
I hear what you're saying, but there was a motion and we did vote. So are you?
Yeah, but things
saying-
change. We didn't vote on the report. I mean, that was a point in time, as we have said.
But
You're right, Allison. Things have changed. However, that's a vote of record that this committee took. And at that time, we made that vote based on the best information we had possible. Now, the second point could preclude the first point pretty easily. We can't erase our vote. So I think we should leave number 1 in. We punt to the JLMC and the rules committees on further restrictions into the building. And frankly, I just cannot support requiring vaccines to get into this building, because then we close the doors to the General Assembly for all.
84% of Vermonters are vaccinated.
I'm fine with that, but still we cannot.
We're not closing the doors to Vermont.
Can't close to the doors. to the
we
General
made to our colleagues.
And to some in our colleagues, yeah. So we have colleagues that will not be able to get vaccinated. Well, I think we should leave number 1 in, affirm number 2, and then move forward, because that is way up our area of jurisdiction for this committee.
Right, which is why I would suggest we fully leave it to,
I can't agree by just doing away with the vote because at the time we made that vote with the best information we had, and it's a matter of record. It's a pretty strong vote.
So if in number 2, where we talk about proof of vaccination should not be required, but JLMC and the relevant rules committee should assess whether masks or other personal health measures. So that statement, masks or other personal health measures should be required based on state health orders and CDC. Could other personal health measures include vaccinations?
They could.
I don't think they can, consistent with the first sentence, the first clause.
Just asking, because would it be worth it to say whether masks or vaccinations or other personal health measures should be required based on state health orders or CDC and CDC guidance issued between submission of this report and the convening of 2022 session? Janet?
I think that if we're seriously talking, or if JLMC and the relevant rules committees are seriously talking about a vaccination mandate to walk into the building, then we should not be in the building. And so I would not support what you're talking about. I think.
And you think we would be remote at that point? If it really got a lot worse, we would be working remotely. We'd be back to working remotely.
Yes, I don't think you can allow some people in the building and expect to enforce a rule that says that other people or everybody who wants to come in has to submit proof of vaccination. I don't know how on earth you'd enforce it. I don't think it's consistent with the Constitution. I think if we're at that point, we shouldn't be here.
See?
I was just gonna say, we've already said the first clause of 2 in 1. So could we just strike the first clause of number 2? And then, hard to start with an acronym, maybe spell it out. JLMC and the relevant rules committee should assess whether masks or other personal health measures and on and on and on. And it takes the mention of vaccination out of 2. So we have it in 1 and then we have 2. I'm not saying that puts vaccination into a health measure, but it takes that statement out of number 2 because we've said it done twice.
Right. You're right. It does say it twice.
Yeah, it does.
So let me put a hypothetical out here. So if the governor in October or into September requires state employees to get vaccinated, requires teachers to get vaccinated, and CDC is making that same recommendation, where does the legislative body fall within that?
So all the things I've read about that say either you have to be vaccinated or you have to be tested regularly. I don't think I've seen a proposal that says that you have to have proof of vaccination in order to, well, even I think any of the employer proposals I've seen allow for regular testing. So I don't think we should be in the building if we're at that point. So, yeah, something there.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know what the lay of the land will be in a month. We don't know what it will be in October, November, or December. We're doing the best work we can at this point in time.
Right. I guess that's just my concern is we're doing the best work we can do at the moment, but things have already changed since we took that vote. The governor today I understand, is making, different recommendations on vaccinations for certain departments. I mean, I think things are in flux. How do we make this, John has a.
John?
We've talked about this before in terms of requiring vaccination. One of the realities is some of our people are going to be medically advised not to be vaccinated. And we know we have people who have had cancer and various, and they are potentially immunocompromised, so we can't require universal vaccination.
And some philosophically don't agree to be
Well,
vaccinated.
I have less patience with them, but you're right.
That's,
Yes.
That's
yes,
there.
but It's philosophical and for whatever reason, but there's some members who simply can't, so, or shouldn't. Or it would do no good to be vaccinated. So to require everyone to be vaccinated would be, it wouldn't be fair.
Anthony?
I agree, it wouldn't be fair, but as Janet said, it would mean shutting down of the State House, but I don't think that should stop us from making it clear that we think our earlier vote decision should be reconsidered, not reconsidered for another vote, but I mean, I think we should say something like, at this point in time, the committee recommends that people not be forced to be vaccinated, but we also believe this should be revisited before the opening of the legislative session.
Do we need, should we clarify number one, that at this point in time, persons entering the State House should not be required to be vaccinated?
We took that vote in, was it July or even
Yeah.
June?
With July.
So at that point, we felt, here's our decision, it made sense. I don't disagree with what Janet and others are saying about how you can't really force vaccinations or you have to shut down the building, but I think that's reasonable to assume, but I think that we need to make it clear that we think it needs to be reevaluated. I mean, what we said in July might be very different than what we would feel in December. And if somebody said in December where everybody has to be vaccinated, I'd be more than willing to say, okay, let's go back to Zoom rather than have everybody be vaccinated. I'm more than willing to do that. But I'm not willing to make it appear as if what we decided in July is going to be relevant in December.
Again, I think that's my point. I thank you. So I think qualifying it with in July or at one point in time or whatever, however we want to qualify it. Because it's changing. The landscape is changing daily.
You want to read what you have?
Oh, sure. So here's the map. This is from.
May I quote?
Go check it.
Yeah, may I quote? Thank you.
But we can't hear you. What, this is.
I'm looking at the Digger article today concerning Governor Scott's plan to require vaccinations for staff in certain state institutions. And he leaves in one of the paragraphs, I'm picking this out. The details of the mandate are still being hammered out with the Department of Human Resources. Scott said, but it would not be forced. He said there may be an exit ramp through testing or other restrictions on unvaccinated workers. So he's.
Right, that makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
But it's a fluid situation, is I guess all I'm trying to get at.
Should we make another 2 or 3 to indicate that we realize that this is fluid situation at this time in August? And that we make a recommendation that JLM Rules Committee and leadership
Yes.
revisit the vaccination issue. Would that make more of a problem or not?
I think the issue is not just vaccinations. The whole situation is fluid, and the question about whether we return to the State House
It's fluid.
needs to be revisited.
So,
I would not isolate the vaccination
okay,
question.
so maybe a statement at the top or the new 2 or new 3 or at the beginning indicating that at this time in August,
We believe we can return to the State House, and these are the circumstances, but that may change.
That makes,
Can I say one other thing about the vaccination? The other problem I have with it is sort of the enforcement question is about how do you do it?
it's easy to do now. We have, airlines are, you can get, what,
gonna be
New York State, every New York Stater who's been.
To be at the door saying you can't come in.
Who's gonna-
No, it's easy to scan. You just put the QR code up and it tells you.
Your ID against your vaccination record.
And
I
then-
think it's a horrible thing for us to.
and then somebody will
contemplate
walk
doing.
right
It's
in.
all over the country. For me to get to, to go to another country, you're gonna have to do it.
Okay,
Why don't we just at the end of number 1, can we say something like, This vote, however, this vote was taken with the best available information on the footnote date. And only put the footnote up into the, into number one. So then that would relieve maybe Allison, your anxiety about that, about not having information about in June when we took the vote, times have changed. And I think number two says times are changing.
Right, and it's fluid. I think we do have to,
Maybe put a qualifier at the end of that. I'm not sure if that would satisfy everybody's needs, but it would be a way out.
yeah, we took.
Is that amendable to folks?
I don't know where it goes or what it says.
So at the end of one, so still in the first recommendation, an extra sentence saying something along the lines of, however, the vote on this recommendation was taken actually in June, and the committee recognizes that the situation is fluid. And could, and leadership and others could take into account available information at the time, or
Maybe,
To me, that suggests that we think the vaccination question should be revisited. And I'm okay saying that we should continue to revisit the question about whether we open the State House. But I think if it's open, I think having mandated vaccinations is a mistake.
So it would be important, I think, for number one, to include that this vote was taken at our June 29th meeting.
With the best information available.
with the best information we had available at the time.
And then maybe it's a new 3 that we talk about what Janet just said about really revisiting if COVID cases are on the rise, that we really revisit if we should return in person come January of 2022.
Yeah, recognize the fluidity of this.
Yeah, and we
Of
do
this
that as a
disease.
new 2, so we keep a new 3. We keep the 2 that is there now, and we insert that new 3. Do you follow that one, Ellen?
Yes, although I'm not sure I have the words. So is this a recommendation to
Yes,
leadership or JLM?
it would be a recommendation to JLM and the relevant.
JLMC, joint rules and leadership, I think is what Alice said.
Why is that a new 3 instead of a revised 2?
I didn't want to tinker with 2. That's why. I didn't want to tinker.
2 is more about personal health measures and masking.
Yeah. I didn't want to tinker with it. I thought, do a new 3. That's all. That the situation at this point is fluid in terms of COVID. And that JLMC and the Rules Committee may need to revisit whether or not the legislature returns to the building for the 2022 session. Do our work in person. And not talk about vaccinations, not talk about masks. It just stands on its own. We've addressed vaccinations in 1. We addressed the proof of vaccinations wouldn't be required, and that those 2 committees would assess whether masks or other personal health measures should be required. And then 3 is an out from all of those, 1 and 2. That's sort of how I'm thinking it. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's move on. So we're still on 2. We have new language here on the top of page 9 that the committee recommends that the relevant rules committee has.
Wait, were we gonna, I'm sorry, when you got ahead of me.
Okay, where are you?
First of all, did we strike the first part about proof of vaccination and 2?
No,
Yes,
because I was repetitive.
we were going to start with GLMC.
I thought not.
We didn't.
I'm sorry.
Somebody talked about it. We didn't think.
But I was confused. What, isn't that totally repetitive of what one
Steve-
says?
It is. That's what Steve had recommended because he said it was duplicative of number
Oh,
one.
that's right, Steve, you did recommend that. That's
And basically, the first sentence says what one said, so it seems like it ought to stay JLMC and it ought to start there.
Right, that's what Steve recommended. I thought we'd accepted that.
I don't think we did, did we?
Yeah,
Well,
No,
that's what I'm asking. I mean, isn't that first sentence saying, first part saying
Yes.
what one said?
Yeah. No, because it's in paragraph 1 is talking about encouraging people to be vaccinated. But
Oh,
they would
proof.
not be required to.
To show proof.
Okay, got it. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, okay, all right,
That's
So-
still standing.
Different
We don't
times.
want to have that
Okay.
requirement.
okay.
So I think what Steve was
I
saying,
see the
was
difference.
thinking that they were connected, but they are a little different.
I see the difference.
I mean, but we say in the first one, should not be required to be vaccinated to physically access the Vermont State House.
But we don't want to ask for proof.
But if we're saying they're not required to be vaccinated, there's no.
yeah, should not be
Ask for
required.
proof anyway,
Same thing.
same thing.
we can change one and add, and proof of vaccination, COVID-19 should not be required for entry, and add that into
That was my
one.
understanding, we could change one.
Well, I'm just saying,
I
but I
don't,
think that's
at this
a,
point, I don't care. That extra sentence there is, if it duplicates, fine, as long as it doesn't say something different.
I'm
Paragraph
not a
1
lawyer.
Paragraph 1 is talking about what the State House's reaction is to people being vaccinated. Paragraph 2 is about someone proving whether they have been vaccinated. So I understand where Alice wants to go, that we are still opposed to proof of vaccination. I can see the distinguishing mark. I think it could be left alone and tweak it, but those two paragraphs are talking about something different in elements.
Prisons, hospitals.
So you're saying keep those two
I-
separate?
I would keep. Do we believe you have to prove that you've been vaccinated? That's one question. If the answer to that is no, do we believe you should be vaccinated? That's a different question. And we've encouraged people to be vaccinated in paragraph 1. We have stated that in any event, we are not going to require proof of vaccination for entry into the building in paragraph 2.
Got it.
So are we okay when we're keeping proof of vaccination and keeping that sentence in?
Yeah, that's fine.
Again, that is going to be fluid. There are already easy ways to do it. So, I mean, you may not want to, but the comfort of many of your colleagues may be actually, if you want to increase people's comfort, that would really increase people's comfort to know people have been vaccinated.
You're asking for a vaccine passport.
A verification, it's easy
You are
to do. I mean,
For
it's-
a vaccine passport. I understand the rationale behind what you're saying, but it is a different conversation from whether we are encouraging people to be vaccinated.
right.
Paragraph 1 is fine, the way we've got it now tweaked about the vote being taken on the 29th.
Right.
And we should end up reassessing things. I think JLMC and the rules committees have to. I would be in favor of Janet's proposal that if we are at a point where we are requiring proof of vaccination, we shouldn't be in the building.
Right. I hear that.
That's a strong statement to make, but I totally agree. We should not be violating a constitutional right, in my opinion, without a governor's mandate in place. If a governor's mandate, emergency order comes down and says something, that's a different story, and I might want to rethink that. But the reason he put a declaration in place to begin with was because we did not have enough PPE, ICU space, and the immediate onslaught was threatening the deaths of people going forward. If you are vaccinated now and you are exposed to the virus, we are supposed to have a minimized reaction to it as a result. I'm not
Right.
speaking medically because that's not my loop. Yes, we hope. But thus far, I haven't seen any evidence in the state that says somebody who has been vaccinated has been exposed and has died as a result of that exposure. If the governor's declared emergency is not in place, I really think we are on shaky ground.
I hear you.
Constitution requiring a passport to get into the building. I know some people are going to be uncomfortable with that, but that would be where I'm going.
But with a new 3 that then allows a reevaluation of whether or not we should come back into the building.
Yep.
That's great.
And
Yep.
all of these issues, that we haven't closed the door on all the options. That we really look at whether or not it would be appropriate to come back into the building with information that may be coming out in September, October, or November that we have no idea about at this point. This is a very, very fluid situation.
And we're wanting people to be comfortable when they're in the building. That's our whole point.
So are we okay with 2 as is currently drafted in front of us that does start with proof of vaccinations?
Have one more.
John,
The last line, CDC is misnamed.
Center for,
It should be centers, plural, for disease control and prevention.
Okay.
Is the current name, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
so can we flip the page to 9? And this is where we wanted to make sure, wherever there's rules, House Senate, or joint rules, that they adopt rules that are consistent with each other.
Right. Critically important.
Okay, so then we have a new 3. And then now 3 will be 4. And that should meet physically within the State House during the session. Where is our recommendation about seating capacity within those rooms? I don't want to lose that.
I don't know.
I don't think it's anywhere, but we did make a decision on seating capacity, that it would be in these standing committee rooms that we now have laid out, that we would base the number of folks in that committee room, in those committee rooms, based on the number of seats available for people to sit. It would be seating capacity.
Right.
I don't know where the best place is to put that. Would it be in this section here?
They put it right after 3.
Yep.
Put a new,
Definitely.
a new.
I'd do it after the standing committees.
Refer to the old numbers as we move forward, so
Right.
I get too confused.
So I do it after you refer to the standing committees being back in.
Do it in the next paragraph within that same section.
Yeah, you could just do a second paragraph there.
You do another paragraph there.
Do a separate recommendation. I think capacity limits is a fairly big deal.
Okay,
And I think the recommendation of standing committees to meet physically is also a big deal. So
Yeah,
okay.
but that comes first.
So capacity standards within these standing committees would be the seating capacity of that particular room.
Yeah, that would be our new 5.
yeah, and that would be a number, not do 4 or no, whatever.
And should
No, 5.
indicate that there should be a placard at the door indicating that
Yeah, I don't,
Well,
or not?
that's operations more than kind of a.
I think Janet's
People
No,
counters?
it's up to. I don't think it needs to be enshrined.
I mean, I'm just putting on the table what people have talked about. Placard at the door, people counters.
I think we leave that to the chief and the sergeant at arms, and I think that we recommend that there is a capacity standard for each room determined, and you could say determined by the sergeant at arms and the chief, but I don't think you need to be specific.
On the sergeant at arms, no, it's the seating capacities determined by the number of seats in that.
Right, exactly. But that number will be specific to each room and be posted by the sergeant at arms.
We could say that it should be posted
So
in some way.
it should be posted.
Yeah, I just said,
Say
Yeah.
that.
that's what I said.
I don't need to talk about a placard.
Okay.
Right.
So that would be,
Based on the number of seats available and posted by the sergeant at arms for each room.
It's posted.
Posted?
Should-
Yeah, okay, posted.
should we indicate who would be responsible for that, that's leadership committee?
Well, I was
Because we were clear that we did not want committee assistance.
just going to say, we should say enforced or monitored by committee leadership and specifically say not by the committee assistant. Is that we discussed that a
Not by
lot.
staff.
Not by staff, yeah, not by committee staff.
Okay,
So that should all be in the same
I think so.
paragraph. So did you follow that one, Ellen?
Sure, and also this morning you used the phrase, train the chairs on how to, limit and enforce the capacity. That was what you discussed this morning, but I don't know if you want to make that separate or.
Seems like an operation detail.
So does that mean we should put the language in or not? And
Not.
we should not
Not,
Leave it out.
leave it out.
that can be part of our instructions for the new session, if we're here.
We could spend half an hour deciding how
Yeah,
to write
right.
that sentence.
Exactly.
So but we are including the one about leadership, committee leadership.
Yes,
Yes.
And not committee assistant.
And not
and
staff.
not legislative, not committee staff.
Guys want to pass those candies around?
Anything stronger?
Aren't you glad we didn't start at 1 o'clock?
Still waiting for the alcohol.
Yeah, and I have my.
Madam Chair,
I know, we're gonna keep slugging.
we're gonna have to,
If we don't finish, we're back here next week.
then we gotta leave by 5 minutes.
Next week, if we don't. So let's keep going. So number 4, we renumbered.
And so it shall read, subject to approval by the License Rules Committees, regularly scheduled caucuses of political parties should use the well of the House for caucuses, the Senate chamber for caucuses, or appropriately sized committee rooms. Unscheduled or occasional caucuses of the political parties should use the chambers, the cafeteria, room 11, or the legislative lounge when available.
Great. What's our new 6?
We add available committee room space.
So read that again, unscheduled or occasional caucuses of the House political parties,
I think we struck House
of
because.
the political parties.
Yeah.
Should use the,
Chamber, I said chambers, but it could, instead of just using well of the House and Senate.
Yeah, I would say just the chambers. So we,
But it's, that's a.
the chambers, cafeteria, room 11, room 24, or would you say, Joe, appropriate? available?
Senate Republican Caucus is 7 members.
Meet the
Meet
committee room.
virtually anywhere in the building, but can't with this language because we're supposed to be meeting in the cafeteria, room 11 or 24.
or other rooms when available. How about that?
Is room 24 the existing legislative lounge? So
Well, so I guess that I was just wondering if the second sentence was even necessary. I mean, about unscheduled versus scheduled.
They're different. We're trying to deal with the,
Different.
Pop-up.
Pop-up ones.
Right.
You're on the floor, you got an amendment, you have to go to caucus.
Right, but are they using different physical spaces? They are.
yes.
Sometimes. Some stay in the,
Sure.
What if we change should to may?
The wild card is if it's a House
Then
caucus,
Joe
the
can
Senate
make
may be
already
in
once.
session, so we can't.
yeah,
Yeah, because if you say or other rooms, you gotta say within the state house.
May for works good.
May works.
may use the chamber, in other rooms. or other rooms.
You shouldn't
when
even
available.
put in or other rooms unless you say within the State House, because those caucuses should be within the State House. John?
Back to room 24 where it says legislative lounge. If it's not being used as that, that will be confusing, won't it? Or, hey,
When
no, I guess it
available, when available.
but room 24 won't be the lounge.
That's true. Strike legislative lounge.
I think it was put in there for us to know which room it was. Because people don't think of room 20, the legislative lounge is room 24.
I agree with John. Could be confusing.
Okay,
So I'm adding 4 other rooms,
no,
not adding more.
no, you're changing, should use the cafeteria to may.
Okay.
May use the chambers. I thought we had, may use the chambers, cafeteria room. Or how about just or other rooms when available? Do we?
No, we're fine.
This
Let's
is
keep
fine.
going.
It's not, the world won't rest on this.
Yes, this is,
Let's go. When you say other rooms, you have to make sure it's within the state.
right.
Well, let's go to 5.
So this is now the new 7. I feel like, is that correct?
For some people that may work, for other people that makes them confused. So it's the number 5 on page 9 of the draft that's in front of us.
So, and this language also changed slightly this morning. So, subject to approval of the relevant rules committees, use of the well of the House representatives or the Senate chambers should be used as a potential meeting space for joint standing committees and certain non-standing committee meetings, period.
I just took out a repeating.
Yeah.
Okay. Specialty caucuses. Boy, this is gonna be fun.
Oh, this is another one that was rewritten.
Right.
So. I think we just decided that it's, if available, was added. So specialty caucuses, public hearings, or similar meetings should use space within 109 State Street if available, or elsewhere within the State House if available for meetings. Unless you wanted to have State House be first in that sentence. State House,
I had those State House taken out.
taken out.
Yeah, what I had, we weren't sure, specialty caucuses, public hearings, or similar meetings should use space within 109 State Street, if available. Because they're gonna look at the State House first, is our hope.
And then, or elsewhere within the State House?
I think we took that out. I have it in brackets.
I don't know about that because
No, okay.
the Northeast Kingdom Caucus has probably 10 people who meet regularly. They have more numbers than that, but there's no reason why that caucus couldn't use a Senate committee room that's not being used at that moment.
So the other thing is, when we broke for lunch, Chief Romeo and I worked on language, and maybe this is going to just entirely replace this. But the language that we discussed this morning was standing committees, joint committees, and public hearings should have priority use of legislative spaces, scheduling procedures. Specialty caucuses should consider meeting in 109 State Street when appropriate. Space in the State House is not available. To the extent possible, the sergeant at arms should coordinate a unified scheduling process for spaces. That could replace the whole.
That
thing.
Sounds pretty good to
That
me.
sounds good on
Okay.
first surface.
Okay.
So that would replace number 5, well, the
The
old,
bottom one.
the whole section. Okay, why don't you insert that in place of this language? Okay,
Good
page
work.
10,
Glad you guys worked on it.
use of the card room. Oh, boy. For presentation, should be paused. And then the next,
Not really gonna exist.
Right.
Well, maybe we should refer to the section where we make that recommendation, because it might exist,
Right.
depending.
We'd already decided not to use it.
So we could say,
There is still that area in front of the fireplace.
there, yeah.
Yeah.
I would just leave it there, because we don't know what's gonna happen with, if that space will be used for Mike and his folks or someplace else. So then we're dealing now with Cedar Creek. Cedar Creek should not be used for presentations, receptions, press conferences during the 2022 legislative session because of issues with congestion and airflow in that room. So we okay with that?
Well, I think a lot of us aren't okay with that. I think it should be an option for small press conferences. But, you know, we've already said airflow is not air quality, so I wouldn't put anything on airflow. And
How about if we use that, Allison? Large press conferences as determined by the sergeant at arms.
I think that would be,
Used for presentations, receptions, or large press conferences, parentheses, as determined by the sergeant at arms during the 22 legislative session.
that's fine. I think you're going to find the cafeteria is heavily pressed and that we're going to need more space than what. Sorry, John, you were.
So John?
I like Joe's suggestion, but it would now be the time to bring up the, I had talked to a couple of you, for the larger press conferences, it might be useful to specify that press conferences shall be held in 109 or in, is it 133? And what I liked about that is that, and I'm thinking of the area where we're first meeting, that kind of lobby area in front of the committee room. There's a large space there that I think would be ideal for press conferences. Plus it continues on up into the library stacks so that if there were a lot of people, you could actually spread out. It would accommodate a lot of people. And it would also serve another purpose in that probably fewer people would make the trek over there. So the press conferences would probably be smaller, and that would meet another one of our goals. So we could specifically say press conferences shall be held in, I don't know how to identify
A
that
designated
space.
place. Yeah.
How to identify that area in 109 or in 133.
So that would say that press conferences would not be held in the State House, or you quantifying that by saying large press conferences?
Well, you could say, the Cedar Creek room may only be used for very small, if at all. But anyway, that was my idea, and a couple of you liked it.
Well, and I think what we heard Janet say was she'd like a designated place for them. That her idea would be to have a designated one place to do press conference.
We would make a recommendation that we designate space within 109 State Street as areas that can be used for press conferences. 133 State Street could also be used. 109 will be the priority. 133 State Street could also be used.
So that was my
Are we
recommendation.
saying that, going back to the question of whether or not there will be press conferences in the Cedar Creek room, we're saying that that will not be the case?
Saying no press conferences in the Cedar Creek room. But if there are press conferences, they would be held over in 109. And we can give the room numbers, or we can give the
We could
hallway.
actually also say, the auditorium if available, because that's really easy access. Or the second floor, 109 or 133.
Or 133 State Street.
Or an available room in the State House, other than.
Well, there isn't one.
There probably isn't.
The only possibility is a cafeteria, and we don't want to avoid we've already talked about the receptions and presentations there and lunch, and
Yeah, I think we're gonna find,
there really isn't one except the Cedar Creek room.
Well,
you're gonna make your point.
so the speaker holds press conferences in her office. I assume that's going to continue.
Right, and the pro tem and.
Pro Tem does that, so those
We
are
don't
going to
want to,
continue to happen.
yeah, we don't want to eliminate that.
Are those technically press conferences?
Yeah,
I guess they are.
just like the governor's press conference is in his office.
Yeah.
But I think you want to just not run into a situation where we're saying the State House is an important place, obviously, that's why standing committees are going to be here. But, you know, advocates who are part of the process, if they want to make a public statement, they have to go to another building. I just think that's something to be aware of.
So we could say, I wonder if we could say something to the effect that press conferences would be held in cafeteria. The cafeteria is unavailable.
Or you could just leave it to schedule with the sergeant at arms, and the sergeant at arms can schedule them, which is what I think we should do, because it's
Just trying to think it through.
Part of what my recommendation does is it suggests that the press conferences do not have to be in this building, that they probably won't be because
Well, that may be the rub in terms of what Anthony put out, that we're here to do our legislative work. I've heard conversations prior to our break that press conferences are really part of that legislative work. So now we're saying press conferences should not be in the State House.
Right.
and that's a concern of yours.
Part of the
This
complex.
is Anthony's biggest concern. I think this is a concern of him.
Well, that'd be an argument for moving out of the Pink Lady.
Go for it.
What?
It's not,
I mean, it's all part of the Capitol complex. It's,
well, yeah, and you got all branches of government in there.
To John's suggestion, can you say, shall primarily be held in 109 or 133? And then maybe assuage Anthony's concerns about not having a press conference at the end of this hall. That might be, if it wasn't for all these committee rooms, that would be a great place for a small press conference.
I mean, I would also go back to the idea of saying that press conferences of a limited size can take place in the Cedar Creek room. You know,
How do you, I'm sorry, how do you limit the size?
well, you have a recommendation, you say that I don't know what the size would be, I'm not prepared to say that, but you know, I mean, if you do a press conference with 6 people, that's not a big problem as opposed to doing a press conference with 60 people.
do you always know? No, that's.
Yeah, no, you know, as a person organizing the press conference, you have a pretty good idea of who's going to be there. I mean, you do.
I'm at a loss in terms of how we resolve this. I'm at a loss. I mean, we said that no press conferences would be held in the Cedar Creek room as a way to help movement of traffic through the building, so people feel okay being in the building and not get congested when they're trying to go from one part of the building to the other part. We then said press conferences can be held up in the cafeteria. Then the conversation goes, well, that puts a lot of pressure on the cafeteria if there's a reception there or there's a presentation there. So I don't know where to go with this.
I'd suggest I'd suggest we start with press conferences will be scheduled by the sergeant, scheduling of press conferences will be done through the sergeant at arms, who will, that office will have what spaces are available and the spaces that we've okayed for those. And you could then say they may be in the State House, 109 State Street or 133.
But do we carve out and say the Cedar Creek room is not to be used for press conferences within that? That's the issue.
And I don't think we should, I think we should leave some flexibility for the Cedar.
That's the issue.
Well,
The
that's-
issue is whether or not you use the Cedar Creek room for a press conference or not. That's the issue.
Can I suggest that the report says that we're split on whether this?
We can't decide.
Well, I mean, whether this, but we agree on 109, we agree on 133, we agree on this cafeteria if it's available, and we're split on the Cedar Creek room. I mean, that's factual.
Just, it
I
is.
think we should, I don't think we should put press conferences in there. I think the small ones will find other places to go and the big ones don't belong in there. That's, so, you know, we don't agree. That's okay.
Right, it is. And we can move on.
So one of our recommendations is we're split as a committee.
Yeah, on that
On that.
issue, on the use of Cedar Creek room or small press conferences, we're in agreement on the large ones that they don't belong.
Absolutely.
So we're split on that one relatively small issue. I don't think that's the end of the world.
Do we agree that the large ones, everyone agree with that? The large ones should not be in there?
I think that everyone.
Yeah, I think there should not be overcrowding of it.
Yeah.
That's Cedar Creek room.
Well, or even maybe in the state. I mean, it is possible that the large press conferences belong in 109 or 133. But if we say that the sergeant at arms will schedule them and that these are the places she may schedule them, puts people on notice that they aren't all going to be in the Cedar Creek room.
So maybe we do have an agreement here. Cedar Creek room should not be used for presentations, receptions, or large press conferences.
Right.
During the 22 session. So then, do we then just make a recommendation that, I don't know, that the large press conferences could be in other available space within the State House or at 109?
I wouldn't do
No?
that. And I just let Janet schedule them where she will find out what size they are. She will schedule them in the room that's appropriate for them.
I do think it would be good to, because other people think of it, to say that large press conferences may be scheduled in 133 and
Right.
109.
Yeah,
That is a possibility,
Mhm.
maybe even the pavilion. The only place we disagree, and I think we actually genuinely disagree, so I might as well say it, is on the small press conferences in the Cedar Creek room.
Mhm.
I would like to insert the word primarily in 109. Press conferences shall be held primarily in 109.
Large press.
primarily what, Butch? We can't hear you down here.
Just
Also,
say
I would
press
just say press
conferences?
conference shall be held primarily in 109. And then, or also 133, which is the least desirable places, and the cafeteria. And I don't know how to handle this Cedar Creek other than
Well,
you and I aren't going to disagree.
Well, we could say in
Okay.
terms of smaller press conferences, use of Cedar Creek, the committee is split.
Yeah.
That could be our recommendation. John?
I do think we need to mention large press conferences in the other locations, so I think we need.
Yeah,
What
we
you
are.
just did.
No, but I know, but I'm supporting that, and the reason is we have to make sure that this committee is coming forward recognizing that there is no good place in this building to hold a large press conference.
Yeah.
And that's the main point. And if we're going to list them, we should probably list the two locations in 109 because probably the auditorium would be preferred if available because of public access.
Right, the pavilion.
It's a lot easier
auditorium.
for people to get in there. So if it's available, it seems like that should be the first choice for a large one.
So we just said 109. 109 has a.
Well, I know, but I'm trying to think of being, should we be more specific in terms of public access? The auditorium is better.
Yeah, I think if we're going to allow Sergeant at Arms to schedule.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just,
Flexibility.
you see my point though.
Yeah, I get it.
Yep, okay.
Do you have the gist of this, Alan?
I'm not sure.
So we made the agreement that large press conferences should not be in the Cedar Creek room.
So that's in 7.
Okay.
And then in 8, there was earlier this morning and then just now discussion that press conferences should be booked through the Sergeant at Arms based on availability of rooms
Based on,
or
Just not even based,
Should be scheduled through the sergeant.
yeah, period.
I mean, she can't schedule if it's not available, so.
Okay.
Right.
And then I think it's a new one. The committee is split on the use of the Cedar Creek room for the use of small press conferences. Large press conferences should not be in the Cedar Creek room.
Yeah, we've said
I don't know
that.
if you want
And I.
That's already in the-
Where you need to put primarily, they should be in 109.
to, so, and is
The
that,
large ones. should
is that
be
large or?
Press conference
Primarily the large ones.
or anyone.
You think all.
Preferred location for press conferences is 109.
Assuming we're not talking about either the governors or lieutenant governors or the speakers' press conferences
Or the pro tem.
or the pro tem.
Because they all have rooms for them.
Well,
Template.
sometimes they turn out pretty large. If one of them has a major policy
I wouldn't-
they want to put out there.
So would the well of the house be available?
Yeah,
It would
I would
not
think if
be
we're not in
used. So
session,
there's
well,
there's pressure relief valve there if we allow them to be here.
Why don't we just give
There's
the
like-
sergeant at arms?
Yeah, just give it to Janet.
Give it to the sergeant at arms authority to schedule. Keep in mind the spaces
Right.
and the,
Madam Chair, this is Janet.
oh, there she
you're
is.
there.
Hey.
We didn't
Yeah,
see
no,
you.
I'm-
Janet,
no, I know, I'm listening. I think that's okay if we can just make it clear that just because you're requesting it, it may not be available, though. Is there any way we could?
Right.
phrase that? Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
and then I'm good with it. Thank you.
so let's help Ellen here a little bit. So we're going to make a recommendation that press conferences are scheduled through the sergeant at arms. And the sergeant at arms will help me out here, Janet, that the sergeant at arms will work to find available space. I think we want to say within the state house, this available space. Does that
Right,
work,
but
Janet?
well, yes, I just want to, if we could just make it clear how we can wordsmith it to say there may not always be like if some of these large groups want to come in on a certain day and have their press conference, but we can't accommodate them. Is there a way that you could say the sergeant at arms won't be able to accommodate if there's not space
Sergeant at arms
available?
may Not be able to accommodate all the requests.
Say as
If
available.
there's,
Say that
As available. Yeah.
As
yeah,
available
as available.
Sergeant at
Right,
arms
right.
for available space.
within the Capitol complex.
Yeah,
Yes, okay.
I'd use the
gotcha.
Capitol complex.
Yep,
So help Ellen, rephrase that, Joe, so Ellen has that.
I forgot.
So this is its own recommendation.
Yes.
So press conferences should be booked through the sergeant at arms. The sergeant at arms will work to find available.
No. Should
To be scheduled, not booked,
be scheduled for available space through the,
within the Capitol complex.
I mean, if you use the word available. then
There's too much information being given
Yeah.
here for Ellen. It's not booked, it's scheduled through.
It's scheduled now.
Okay.
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 And then the thinking is the sergeant at arms will look at available space within the Capitol complex.
Right. Perfect.
So I'm sorry again. So one more time. So press conferences should be scheduled through the sergeant at arms.
Right.
What about the Capitol complex?
In space available
As available
in the Capitol.
within the Capitol complex.
Joe is writing. Are you writing about this?
Yes. complex,
Hang on here. Hang on, John.
In, what's the word I'm looking for? Not in corroboration, but in,
Collaboration.
Consult.
Coordinated.
what we're trying to do is make sure Janet is given the authority to do what is based on our charge. I'm missing a word.
I think we're all tired.
We are.
Well, it's now after 5.
Well, within the Capitol complex,
I think we just.
reflecting the needs of,
I think we're overthinking.
Yeah,
I think just within the Capitol complex, let it be.
let's look at words and see if they, no.
Can you reread it? Oh, John, I'm sorry, hang on,
I
John.
still think we need to capture that this committee recognizes that large press conferences probably can't be accommodated in this building. And we're not saying that.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to.
The Capitol complex, yes, but I think the expectation should be if you have a large press conference, it's probably not going to be in the State House.
It'll be in 109.
And I think, we should capture that somehow in this.
Okay, because so I know the conversation earlier about the cafeteria talked a little bit about press conferences in the cafeteria, and I guess I wasn't sure where you left off on that.
We don't know where we left off on that.
Okay, so, yeah.
I think that what we're doing is clarifying that the sergeant at arms will schedule them in space that's available within the Capitol complex.
Some of the available spaces are
Yeah, exactly.
the 109 where there's a
State House 109, 133,
133.
period.
Yep, that's good.
So we do say in 7, Cedar Creek room should not be used for presentation, receptions, large press conferences during this session. 22 session. And then we have another section that deals with this recommendation that the sergeant at arms would schedule a press conference. They need to work through the sergeant at arms, and the sergeant at arms would look at the available space.
Within the Capitol complex,
Which includes.
which includes the State House, 109 State Street and 133 State Street.
Cafeteria. Sorry.
That's in the State House. So book it.
Capture that? Okay. Okay, let's move on. Presentation and receptions. Large press conferences during the 22 session would be held in the cafeteria. Now, presentations.
We've taken large. press
We've taken
conferences.
large, that's
Dealt with
right,
them separately.
right.
And
So,
Janet suggested not using presentation.
right, I was just gonna say that. Janet is recommending instead of presentation, to use the term sidebars.
Nothing.
So
I don't know what a sidebar is, a presentation on.
Mean something to the people in the cafeteria.
cafeteria.
Let's do,
That's like breakfast.
right.
Some people who,
That is in the second sentence, but
no, we need presentations should be changed to
She didn't-
side.
She was suggesting not using the word presentation, and it
Yeah, it
had
has
to
a
do with the
different meaning.
relationship with the cafeteria, so I'm willing to do it.
What does,
Thank you.
John?
if you have a group giving out grants, for example, is that a press conference, is that a reception? What is that?
It's a
It's usually a reception.
It's a reception, and we're only doing one a day.
We haven't decided.
So we-
So presentation at the recommend of our sergeant at arms, because she books these, she also works with the cafeteria folks. It'd be better if it was sidebars and receptions.
What's the difference between a sidebar and a side table?
That side
It's
table
just-
would probably be taken out.
Yeah, it's just what she asked us.
So could we classify our morning sidebars as a reception and do away with presentations?
Janet, I think you need to weigh in here a little bit. Did you hear Butch's question?
Yes, well, could you say one more time, please? I'm sorry.
And Janet, we're also having a hard time hearing you too.
Mike, can we turn her up? Can you turn yourself
Sorry.
up, Janet?
Can I do what?
No, you-
Turn the sound up.
Can you turn your sound up?
Yep, it's turned up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's better.
We'll manage.
So Butch,
Okay.
can you, rephrase your question?
Hi, Janet. So my question was, can we just not say presentations at all and consider a sidebar coffee in the morning a reception? Which it technically is.
Well, Well, we could, it's just not how we refer to them and everybody's aware of what those are, but it doesn't matter. I think for these purposes, it would be, I just think that the public or anyone knows that the receptions are in the afternoon and the sidebars or the sidebar breakfasts or.
And I agree with Janet, but I didn't know what a sidebar was till 10 or 11 years ago. So the public reading the report may be, we may have to put a glossary in or something.
I just learned what it was about a minute ago.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Jan.
So we could say
Okay.
receptions and sidebars during the 2022 session be held in cafeteria. And we can take out that last sentence. Presentations and receptions include the coffee side table offerings, because that's a sidebar. So the next question is,
Now, you know,
do we limit
security.
one reception sidebar in the morning and one in the afternoon? Do we just say there should be two sidebars and receptions per day, or do we say three? We are saying that they're going to be managed by the sergeant at arms and based on availability.
I would leave
Right.
it there. You agree?
Yeah, I do. I think that when we say, like, it's hard for the cafeteria to have sportsman night and another reception like in previous years. So I think it's okay to say one reception per day, whether it be at 4 o'clock or whether it be at 7 for, like a banquet or something.
Janet, does farmer's night fall within this language?
Well,
Fa-
they don't very
It's not a
rarely.
sidebar and it's not a reception. It is, however, a presentation.
That's right.
You took presentation.
Right, but I
And
thought we're
it's
taking the
another
word.
space.
It's a function within the well of the house.
And it's a legislative function.
And
Not really
sometimes,
ours. Yeah.
and sometimes there is a meal that goes with that.
Well, sometimes
that
the
would have to be-
cafeteria is open.
Yeah,
Right,
that would
the
have to be
cafeteria is
scheduled.
open, But you negotiate that with.
Yeah. The VSO negotiates that. The only one.
Right.
But that's usually. Well, never mind.
So how do we not exclude farmer's night from this, Janet?
It's not a
Well-
reception or a sidebar.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Well, I was gonna say, we're now silent on it because we took the word presentation out.
So we're silent on it, so we're not going to worry about it.
We're
not
not,
gonna worry
we're not regulating it. Language by omitting it.
That's in the well anyway.
And it's right, it's in a separate place. If they want to have a dinner, then if the cafeteria is available, that will be another conversation.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
So where are we, folks?
We're done.
We're slouching towards Bethlehem.
So do we limit the sidebar and reception to one in the morning and one in the afternoon, or two a day?
I'd limit them to two.
Two a day?
That's fine.
Okay, two per day.
Hey, folks, can I ask a question? I'm so sorry, I might have missed it, but did the committee talk about the actual cafeteria at lunchtime at all? Did you make any recommendation? Okay. Are
No,
we-
did you want us to?
Well, I mean, I think,
What were you thinking?
well, I don't, if we're going to have 80 people in there at a time, or do we decide that we're not doing that? Or are we gonna just put all the chairs back in, which is 175 in both places?
Okay, so when committees break for lunch, should we say, are you thinking that we limit the capacity in the cafeteria, which then means that there should be structure for when committees are released
Yeah, maybe we need
for
to.
lunch? That's a rotating
Well-
basis.
I mean, it would probably
We need-
work, and if we could put some nice signage that would say that we, hope that these are the members' time for lunch, if you could please not be in the cafeteria for sitting. I mean, we can, I guess that doesn't really need to go on the report. We can just manage it. But we might have to talk to leadership about maybe staggering lunch times a little bit to just
Yeah.
try to free up.
You can do that.
That sounds like what you're getting at.
I hope not.
But I guess we could do, does that need to be in the report? Maybe we could just try to manage it the best
I'm
we
picking
can.
up, Janet, that people don't want to do that in the report, that's a discussion with leadership.
Gotcha. Yep.
I think the number of
But
chairs makes sense.
Should we recommend that the number of chairs be limited in the cafeteria?
I wouldn't, well, I wouldn't,
I think that's part of the capacity thing that we'll discuss with the other committee.
Well,
Butch?
we said earlier in the report, Janet, you may have missed it, that we've agreed that capacity of committee rooms are based on the number of places people can sit. So if you translate that to the capacity of the cafeteria, it's the number of places people can sit. So if we put 175 chairs in the cafeteria, that's the capacity of the cafeteria.
Okay.
Janet, does
All
that
right.
175 also include the chairs out in the hallway there?
Yes, that's 175 is both spaces. So right now, the recommendation for the air is 80 within the glass doors, which has better ventilation. If we're going by that, or going to try to do that. I think maybe Butch is right in that, you know, it does reflect the same as, you know, the comfortableness in the committee rooms is based on people in seats. We can do that in the cafeteria as well.
How many seats are out there in the hallway? 50?
I wish I could tell you. I don't know.
you mean in the lobbyist section?
Yeah, just the hallway there.
I-
50?
Well, I would say probably
40?
100
10
inside.
tables?
Well, more than.
Janet?
Well,
Yeah,
Janet
I
Ansel.
don't. Oh,
that's, I mean, I'm given the time. I just think this is a decision that we need to give to somebody else. I don't think we're going to resolve it.
No, I agree with you.
Really don't.
I
We've got
think
more of the report to go through and
it's 5:20 and I think we're not, I think that is sort of microman. I think that should be you and the police chief and leadership or whoever.
okay.
yeah, I mean, joint rules may want to weigh in on it, but I think you know, it's August, we'd be making up.
Making up a
figures.
number.
Yeah.
So that's for
Got
the
it.
conversations elsewhere.
Sounds good.
Okay. Let's go to what's 9 on our page 10, that during the session, school tours and group tours, which also include sports teams, would be limited to no more than 2 tours a day and no more than 25 participants per tour. Schools and legislators would be required to inform, schools and legislators should be informed prior to the session that group tours should only be allowed with the prior authorization. I asked to have group tours put in as clarification that it's not something like if you have a couple constituents that come up or a couple students, that's not considered a tour. I mean, you can bring them around, but it's when there's a much larger group that's coming up. So if you have family members that are coming up, you wouldn't have to go through the sergeant at arms for that.
That's fine.
So I think the number 25 is problematic for sports teams, for congratulatory resolutions. You know, a football team had 50 people on it.
And
Boy Scouts,
Yeah.
Eagle Scouts.
Representative Shaw,
That 25 is too small.
well,
Janet?
we talked to the House Clerk about that, and we're working through, we're going to coordinate with the schools and talk to them about limiting the numbers of people that come. So perhaps the resolution can be read in the school gym or something, and the kids, the larger groups could be there. We were kind of noodling through that with the House Clerk's office and the speaker to see what might work better for just next year.
So 25 still was workable. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go on to
Yeah.
10. This is the authorization that we recommended for the 750 for retrofit or fit up. This is approved.
Right, I added a footnote, it's at the bottom of page 11, saying that it was approved by the committee.
So 11, video conferencing and live streaming tools should continue to be available. We're recommending that protocols or rules for appropriate use of the tools, including protocols on when to use it, when to allow persons to participate, and how to police inappropriate use of the tools. So we're making recommendations that the LMC and the Board of Rules Committee really need to look at the policy and procedures around using live streaming and video conferencing.
Yep.
And also in terms of what it means for our archives, and how long the recordings are held. Okay, 12. And this was our 900,000 for Kevin. That was approved.
Oh, great. Cruising along here.
And then on page 12, this is Senate Ag. That room would not be used for Senate Ag Committee, and that it would be moved to the President Pro Tem's office, and that the President Pro Tem would go to Senate Ag. And this should be used as recommended during the 22 legislative session and until determined otherwise by the Senate Committee on Rules. That was the addition at the request of Senator Benning. Okay. 14. These are the rooms that in the 30s and the 40s that should not be used during this session. And then 15 is where we are allowing rooms 9, 10, 11, the lounge, and Ethan Allen room to be used, converted from their traditional legislative use for use of the House during the 2022 legislative session. And that we recommend that these rooms return to their traditional uses after the 22 session as soon as public health risks allow. And then we noted that the standing committees could not be moved into existing Senate standing committee rooms, as the largest Senate committee is smaller than every House committee.
I'm happy to explain that to anybody who asks, but I technically don't think we need to have it in the
I
report.
don't think we need to have it in the report.
Which one the advisory committee noted from that point all the way to the end.
I had to read it 3 times.
So you said delete that too.
So we delete the last two. And then we're making the recommendation that House rules would assign standing committees to the rooms that were converted based on the perceived need of that standing committee's need for physical space due to high-profile, controversial, or historically popular issues that a committee is likely to address.
And I'm okay with it as it is, but I might even say, or for any other reason. I mean, I don't know what their reason's gonna be. It has to do with access, who knows?
John?
I'm curious if the speakers weighed in on having the rules committee make that decision.
Usually would be, wouldn't it?
I don't know. Senators have made those decisions, but I don't know if they've gone to the Rules Committee to have them
Yeah,
endorsed.
I think they do,
Yeah.
because they're laid out in the rules committee. They're laid out in our house rules.
Are the room numbers? Well, it's probably, I mean, she's on the committee, so. Okay,
If it's not appropriate.
she'll say so.
Okay.
Can we
I'm
put a
I'm not
period
sure that
after,
it is in the rules. I don't think so.
can we put a period after the word session? We don't need to explain due to the high profile controversial.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
They're welcome.
I agree that if you take that out, you don't. need my
I'll record
language.
your vote for you, okay?
Well, it's 5:30. I'm sorry.
We don't
I thought
have
we were going to be
a
on at
final.
the latest at 5.
Well, I'm not,
We don't have a vote.
I don't know. I don't know if it's necessary to put that in there, but it does explain that the priorities, the reason we think some of those larger rooms that it's something we have talked about as a committee, that they ought to be used for committees that we expect high participation of the public. So shouldn't we say so? And that's basically what we've discussed.
Although, I mean, I've also had the thought that you could put a low-profile inactive committee in one of the larger rooms so that you'd be able to use it for other purposes on occasion. So I don't know how they're going to make
Well,
that.
that's not necessarily mutually exclusive. There could be some very high profile committee that doesn't meet, when others might want to make use of the room. I don't know, whatever.
I was just thinking, these are recommendations. Recommendations are directive sense as we perceive it. We don't necessarily have to explain why we've done
Right.
that on each and every.
I'm for taking the language out.
The due to high profile, et cetera, from that point on.
Yeah.
So drop that.
People fine with we're dwindling here.
Sure.
Okay.
You can help me.
Easier.
My vote's getting more powerful all the time.
Sorry, can I just, are we deleting half that sentence? Is that what-
We're deleting
Putting-
the last half of the sentence
Putting a
starting,
period after session.
2022 legislative session. Okay, number 17. So should we give the person's name there
I think not.
I don't
in
think we
both
need to.
17 and 18?
May I help? The four of us that you talked about relocating all have unique job titles that are not
Okay.
shared across the bridge, so you could refer to us by those.
Okay,
So Charlene is the operations coordinator. Mariah Burke is the administrative assistant. Going further down to number 18, Ellen. I'm the director of legislative operations, and Peggy is the supervisor of committee services.
So will it stay the same and just put the titles in instead of the names?
right.
That's right. Because, and if you think about it, what if one of those staff people change?
Right.
The person between now and the start of January, we still want that position in that space, so.
Do we have to say that they require quiet working conditions, just to strike all that and
Yes.
just?
Right. Get rid of it. I agree.
But we are saying should be moved temporarily,
Yes.
right? So did you get that to take out? And who require to, with legislators, take that out?
Then again,
We're taking out.
We're taking out and who require quiet working conditions and
Right.
relatively little interactions with legislators.
So
So
they
the
should be
last-
moved temporarily.
for
That
that
stays
section,
in.
the last sentence, do we need to have?
No. We don't. It was all part of a thought process, but
Which section are you on now?
be in there.
Legislative, the last sentence in that paragraph.
Right.
Legislative operations proposed, we could strike that whole
Take it
sentence.
out.
Then 18, the director and the supervisor of committee services would remain in the State House, but be moved from the first floor.
So we say should or will.
Should, well, it's a recommendation. I just would say, but should be moved to a different location. It matters where they are currently. And I would take out our constantly interacting and so on.
Is this where we're going to recommend the 2 potential spaces within that
Yes.
number?
Is this where we,
Right, so you did sort of vote this morning.
Yep.
So it could go in here.
well, yeah,
There were 2 options.
2 options.
And I wouldn't talk about the option that we didn't do because that'll just confuse everybody.
Right, we talk
No.
about the 2 employees could be located in either of 2 sites. I don't know.
Frank.
Second floor of the mezzanine. Or space constructed in the card room. That's
Can say that the committee expressed preference for the
card
card
room.
run, but
There was also
wants to put both options.
puts both options of the
Forward.
card room and the mezzanine.
This is where I thought it would make sense for a cross-reference from the earlier, what was here, number 7? About the no, that wasn't it. It was the card room, number 6. And it just referred to, say something under there like, the committee has further recommendations for the space in the card room as described under number, wherever it will be. Does it make sense to make that cross-reference? Am I making sense or everyone?
I think it makes sense. I don't necessarily think they need to go together because they're about 2 different issues.
Right, we could make one decision and not the other.
Well, I know, but when we're talking about not using that space, but by the way, we have other plans for that space.
No,
It's sort of
because
like-
when we said we couldn't use the card room for presentations, we didn't have another plan for that space. We were thinking of.
But we do
brackets.
now in this report.
Some of us do. So it.
Well, anyway, okay, I was thinking it would
If you
make
think
sense.
somebody's gonna sit and read it with that kind of
not
level
like
of
a
detail,
bill.
then.
I was just thinking that, people may say, oh, well, we can't lose that, that ability to use the card room. Well, but we're also thinking of using it for something else. It seems like it would make sense to say so.
How about if we simply said there are 2 options to relocate these employees? The preferred space is the card room reconstructed by BGS, something like that. Alternative is.
It's fine. You can submit that language to Ellen.
Yeah.
Catch that?
Moving right along.
That's the code.
Yeah, well, wait a minute. Part of 18, the last sentence, rooms 32 and 33 on the first floor should be reserved for use by legislators. Should we say that those rooms that are no longer committee rooms, the 3 in the 40s and the 2 on the 30s would be reserved for use by legislators? We haven't said that
I think it'd be worth
anyplace
saying
else
it for,
except here.
yeah, for all of them. For the 5.
So all 5 of them?
Mhm.
John?
It seems like that's a separate thought, and I would
Yeah.
propose giving it a different number. And
Right.
do we
Yeah.
want to be more specific as, because reserved for use by legislators doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as legislative lounge. And I was thinking that we would want those spaces to be areas where the public and the media and the lobbyists don't go.
Well, sometimes you need to pull aside a commissioner with or some lobbyists and negotiate something, and you can't always do it in the hallway.
Okay,
So if you say the rooms can't be used for anybody but legislators, you can't allow those folks in.
but we didn't bring them into the existing legislative.
No, but we,
So
part of
maybe we should identify a couple as, legislators only.
I'm comfortable with the reserve for use by legislators language, which allows for designating some of them as being only legislators, but doesn't require it. Because I don't really know how that's going to unfold.
anybody does.
Well, okay, it's fine. I'm just was remembering that we had a lot of discussion about if we're going to use the legislators lounge for something else now, what are we going to designate as a legislative lounge? And I thought this committee was going to make a recommendation of what that space or spaces would be.
I think we're too tired to figure it out. I think we have the 4, 5, we have the 5, and I think we indicate on page 12, between the old 14 and 15. 14 lays out what committee rooms would not be used for committee meetings. And maybe in that piece, we indicate those rooms would be available for legislative work, for access by legislators, or something. That's where we put in that those rooms should be reserved for use by legislators. General use by legislators.
Okay.
Put it there at the end of that end of section number 14, that's on page 12. Does that make sense, folks? Okay, so 19 on page 14, space vacated by the legislative operations staff should be converted into a coat room for legislators and the public. Additional information is necessary to address the specific details for entry, design, and access to other offices or doors. Do we need to flesh this out a little bit, or is this
Do we need to talk about the
bathroom?
single stall bathroom in the same spot?
You know, you build a bathroom there, it's gonna be permanent.
Yeah, well,
You build a bathroom there, it's gonna be permanent.
It was pretty handy to have it in the little conference room, which is big. This is a whole different.
Yeah, it's further back in, so it will limit what you can do with the front end of that space.
Did we ask Mike?
well, haven't we already agreed that that's where the coat room and the bathroom are going to be? Why don't we just say the space vacated by legislative operations staff should be converted into a coat room for legislators and the public and a single-use bathroom?
But
Strike the remaining sentence.
End of story.
Okay. Number 20. Human resources staff should be moved to office previously used by David Cheeks. Renovations such as painting, new carpet, new lighting, secure lockable door requested. Advisory committees
I know we say
requested.
have been requested, since we've already had a vote on that. JLMC, strike the last sentence.
Also strike his name.
I think we can
The
take out.
state curator.
We could take that whole last two sentences.
Violations such as painting, right? Oh, boy. Next one is the HVAC system. This is where we really make a statement that we want legislative leadership in BGS to really start initiating planning, construction, installation of a new HVAC system as soon as practical. And this is where we talk about the ASHRAE standard. Or could be, standard for ventilation of acceptable air quality could be required for the current heating and cooling system. Or could be used as a standard for air quality or airflow.
I think you should get rid of quality, put improve airflow. Help improve the overall public health environment within the building. That's pretty vague. But it does demonstrate in that paragraph, we did our homework on what we can accomplish and what we can't accomplish in the short period of time that we've been allotted. But it also signals that we've got to raise this to a high level of priority in the next session.
So I just want to be clear, Joe, what you're saying is take out standard for air quality, just say standard for airflow.
You made the point earlier in that green bar that quality and flow
Are two
are
different
not the same
things,
thing.
right?
It's flow that this standard
ASHRAE
is.
has nothing to do with quality.
Right.
I like the use of public health there because it refers to things like humidity and mold and just general well-being and all that kind of stuff.
So in that sentence, we're taking out the ASHRAE standards will improve airflow, not air
I'm
quality.
just going to
Yep.
strike quality, put in flow, and then strike the yellow highlighted language. After that. You can't go that far. 'cause
Well,
it's
that's
talking
gonna go
about the
into a new
portable.
23
Yeah, that's right.
prior to updating. This is with the purifier. But it shouldn't be prior to updating HVAC system. I took that out. It just says the committee recommends that JLMC and Sergeant Arms review portable air purifier. That's the new 23. We don't say prior to updating the HVAC
But she hasn't
system.
rewritten it yet.
Right. So Butch,
Do you have, are you far enough along in your talks about the HVAC system with BGS so that we can definitively say that we wanted to meet ASHRAE standards?
that's their plan.
That is their plan.
Yeah, that's their plan. That was testified right
Yeah.
along.
They actually told us.
I didn't hear
on the
that.
tour. No, they told us that on the tour. I don't know if everybody was on it. I know at
And
least you and I, when
yeah.
we were talking about, they can bring it up, the House committee rooms can be brought up to ASHRAE standards, the HVAC system.
I missed that testimony.
Uh-huh. Mhm. 15, our conclusion.
We're sick and tired and want to go home.
Oh, no. Is Don out there?
Yes.
He is.
I told him we were almost done.
He's driving. He's driving home. Okay. How's
John
the-
has his hand up.
Oh,
So
John.
before the conclusions, do we want to include just a brief comment that with the legislature really needs to look at renovations, adding a floor to deal with these space issues on a long-term basis? We don't say that, we've discussed it. It could be something pretty vague, but that we know it's become clear to this committee that we don't have the space we need for the committees and the offices and this, staff.
That's what we're gonna look at, right?
Mhm.
No matter what.
No matter what.
But, we have talked about that. I
Yeah,
think
if it's two sentences.
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be long.
Simply say that it's become clear to the committee that expansion of the State House imperative for future operations.
Committee space needs and office and administrative and
Legislative needs.
Yeah.
Janet?
Oh, I'm fine with adding a couple of sentences on it. I also wanted to talk about the,
Did you-
don't come to work sick,
Yes, that
Thank
wasn't in here. So,
which is not here.
what is,
right, so hold that thought. Can you hold that thought?
sorry,
Holding it for a month.
Hold it for another 2 minutes. So we could have another recommendation that this committee recommends that we do further work on how we can address future space needs for legislative work. Operations.
for our expanding legislative needs.
Right. Legislative operations sounds like the administrative side we're talking about.
Us.
For the need to meet the current needs of the General Assembly.
To meet the current needs of the general.
We're told, aren't we told to do that in our chart?
That's what I
We
thought.
are, but it's just kind of saying this is an interim for the session, but there's more work that's going to need to be done.
It's fine. I just did.
Thanks.
Right. Just so that people know this is not the end point, that there's further work, that we're going to recommend further work in addressing the space needs in the future of the future General Assembly space needs. That makes sense. I'm out of wordsmithing. Did you grasp that, Ellen?
Expansion and construction may be needed to address future space needs in the State House.
Will they need it?
Well,
Is
is
needed.
Is needed.
That's pretty strong.
Now, Janet,
so
and it should be more upfront.
I don't know where it goes. I have no idea. It can go in a cover letter.
I
Because
think it should go in here.
Well, I think we need to say something about changing the culture in the State House in terms of people not coming to work sick. That because of technology, people can participate either in committee or watching a meeting or whatever without coming to the State House. And if you're sick, you should stay home.
So that might be good after the, on page 9, which would be the old 3, which heaven knows what the new number is, where we're talking about standing committees should meet fiscally within the State House. Then we have new language there about the seating capacity. Then maybe we put in another bullet that talks about that we recommend that people, legislators and the public, if you're not feeling well, that do not come into the State House and access the legislative proceedings electronically. That we start making that policy.
Where do you think put that?
I'm saying on page 9, where we see 3, that's talking about standing committees.
Right, I see.
And then we have added their seating capacity,
Right.
new language, put in a new bullet after that, a new 4. Talks about, we recommend there be a policy that if members of the that people.
Nobody come into the building if they're not feeling well.
Or possibly in 11, where you discuss video conferencing.
So which,
On page 11, number 11, the video conferencing section.
I think to me, it may not even belong to the report. I just, one of those things that needs to go, we need to keep saying in a million different places.
I think it belongs in the report.
So but I would put it not just where the video conferencing is. I think it has to do with our expectations. People who come, for me, it may actually go better in the, those sections that we've struggled over having to do with vaccinations and
But that's
masking.
right, that's right after the
Okay.
vaccination.
All right.
That's right after it. That's why I was looking at it, because then we go to the standing committees, but part of it saying that the standing committees stay in the State House. If you're not feeling well, anybody you shouldn't, don't come into the State House. You can access the committee proceedings through electronic means.
I mean, at some point, if somebody walks in sneezing and with a box of Kleenex,
That's
everybody
part
should
one.
look at them and say, you should go home.
Yeah.
It's all, it's not COVID, it's just general respect for each other.
But I think you just put it as a bullet. I really think it should
So would that have, so would that constitute a rule change?
No.
To allow us to vote electronically?
No, I
No,
wouldn't
you wouldn't
say-
be able
you
to
wouldn't be
vote
able to
Okay,
electronically.
okay, no, I'm fine with that.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
You-
No, I
Well,
wouldn't
that's
change
up
the
to the
voting.
rules committees to decide, and that's in paragraph 11.
Yeah, I wouldn't change any.
I didn't know if you were contemplating that.
No.
Oh, God. So the conclusion. We got to read the conclusion.
Is there an automatic thing to correct the number? The second to last sentence says offers 21 recommendations. There-
Yeah, well, I'm paying attention to all this.
Actually, we're not exercising democracy here.
I had a, I don't really like the last sentence.
Which based on this testimony, which last sentence.
The last
The very
sentence,
word, these measures should help mitigate public
back
health,
to the,
keeping the State House as healthy as it can be.
I was thinking something like these measures should improve public health and comfort in the State House, so that the Vermont General Assembly can continue to engage in the democracy as we as a state.
I think you could strike the whole sentence and leave it as based on this testimony and debate, the advisory committee offers, however many the number is, recommended measures to implement prior to and during legislative session.
Yep.
I'm fine with that too.
It's shorter.
I like Janet's editing. rules. Just strike.
Right, yeah, that's a good one. I have, are we still in the conclusion?
Mhm.
Okay, never mind.
What have you got?
I was working on a sentence earlier that we were talking about at the beginning about talking about public health, that whole issue. I want to see if anybody likes it.
What page are you on?
It's not, it's a new sentence. It says, while we recognize that it is not possible to completely protect people from exposure to infectious diseases, the committee puts forth these recommendations in hopes of reducing the risk and providing for the comfort and safety of everyone using the State House. Anybody like that?
First blush, it sounds good. I mean, that could be the introductory.
It was well, like one of the first or second sentence to kind of talk about the
Right.
whole thing. Should I read it again?
Yes, please.
While we recognize that it is not possible to completely protect people from exposure to infectious diseases, the committee puts forth these recommendations in hopes of reducing the risk and providing for the comfort and safety of everyone using the State House.
So that could go on page 8 in E. The committee recommends.
Or it can be part of the introduction.
Or it could be part of the introduction, one or the other.
I think it was,
And part of the introduction would be indeed page 6. First sentence.
You began with the word while.
Mhm.
That sort of implies that something came before that.
We're gonna meet next week.
We made a lot of changes.
Yeah, we're gonna meet next week.
Like, yeah, I like the language, but I would put it right under advisory committee recommendations and have that as the lead sentence.
so what page is that?
This is on page 8.
Page 8.
Those sneeze things.
Can we just do that up?
You okay with this suggestion?
What he suggests, yes.
John's language, I think should go on page 8, right under E, as the introductory language to that series of 1, 2, 3.
That's what I suggested, and Janet says it should be in the front. So let's do it in both places.
Do it twice.
We can do it in both places. If we do a cover letter, we can do it in there too, and then say we mean it. You can work with Alan.
I didn't get it.
You can work with Alan. So folks, we're done for today, but we have a lot of changes. I hate to say it, but we're gonna have to meet again to get this done.
I
There's
think we should
nothing.
start at 5 in the afternoon.
Uh-huh.
They go to 6 no matter what.
I think that was a sneaky trick.
No, it wasn't a sneaky trick.
Well,
So what's your schedule?
For you. His board is 10 o'clock that morning, so I'm not gonna get here.
Access to any electronic.
Do we try 1 o'clock and make sure we get the hell out of here? Do we try 1 o'clock
Yeah, then we have-
next Tuesday? At 1 o'clock?
What's the number of the day?
Is that dicey?
The 17th,
Oh, I don't
Well,
know.
then
I
if
have
you
no idea.
2 days beyond the date our report is due.
My anniversary, I would.
But the report is, it's due on a Sunday,
Late?
and then Monday is, I think.
I hope it's
the-
early.
Ah, shit.
Sorry, it's already.
15th of August.
Like,
Sunday. And the following Monday is the holiday. Nobody will really be thinking about it till Tuesday.
There's no possible way we're going to not be able to get this accomplished. in less. I mean, we've got.
We do, we can get this done.
We can get this done, but if we meet at 1 o'clock, we should be out of here by 3 o'clock, quite frankly.
I hope.
Well, we have battled all the hard issues. The only real question is whether people are in favor or not in favor, and just go plowing through and vote
Yeah, I just think
But we enjoy talking about
editorial changes the power.
several times.
Yeah, we gotta take a vote on it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna have a.
getting
I
kind of.
wouldn't schedule it at 1. It'll go on for 5 hours.
Are we
Do
still?
2?
Yeah.
Do 2
I would do
o'clock?
later.
2 o'clock?
Yes, it's still live.
2 o'clock? Can we do 2 o'clock next Tuesday?
Get out of here by then.
I tried
And
today.
the only agenda item is to vote.
Is to vote. Go over the report and to vote. Now, does that give Mike enough time to go through it?
So I'm gonna do it because Mike isn't back until Tuesday. So I'm gonna, you know,
Can you email us the report when you've drafted it and then let us make comment on it before we get back here?
But we have to be
Yeah, that's right.
careful on comments on email.
right, so I would say like, maybe you should pick a date for me to finish this by maybe Thursday or Friday, and then you should review it, you should all review it and then come with prepared comments.
Yep.
And make that.
That would make sure it was quick. We're organized.
I'll tell you.
I'm on a motorcycle. I'd like to get home before dark.
I know, I want to leave. I'm just gonna camp up here
I
next door.
car. I don't know where it's parked. I don't know anything.
I have a driver who's been waiting all day. 2 o'clock next Tuesday. I think I'm gonna live up here next week.
2 o'clock next Tuesday, 1 hour.
Plenty.
Thank you, folks.
Put it for 2 and get done early.
And then we have Jesse. We have Jesse on the 18th.
I would just make so many changes.
Ellen, I'll make sure you're on this.
Oh, yeah, can't.
So we are done. Are we off live stream?
No, you're. still
Okay,
on.
we are done. We will meet again at 2 o'clock next Tuesday to do our final